Yes, you're very welcome along to the Huddle Breakdown. It was an international break, but we are coming back and back with a bang. St. Johnstone in the League Cup final coming up this weekend. Juco James and Alan Morrison are on the line with me as always. Lads, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Hanging in there. Hello, gentlemen.
How are we doing? So it was an international break. Scotland obviously doing the business over the international break. Ireland doing the business as well, albeit against Luxembourg as opposed to one of the best teams in international football right now. But we're not going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about the League Cup semi-final coming up this weekend against St. Johnstone on Saturday. Some questions coming on social media as well. We'll get to them. And we are going to talk about the sad news, really, that broke this week. And that was the passing of Bertie Auld, one of the Lisbon Lions, and beloved character within the club for sure. I mean, outside of his wit and funny remarks and the videos that are being shared around here, Alan, this guy was a legend of the club, a brilliant figure, and just seemed like an all round like really great guy.
Yeah, I mean, just an enormous personality and part of the Celtic fabric for a long time, which any of us would love to be, and he was in many ways the face and voice of the connection between the club at any level and supporters. He was essentially a supporter. He had a wonderful playing career. He was a manager for about 14 years, but then he's been associated with the club. You could call it in a sort of ambassadorial role. That I don't. If you live in, I don't live in Scotland and haven't done for a long time, but I get the sense that virtually every Celtic supporter who lives in Scotland, certainly in Glasgow, has met Bertie at some point or another, because he was the sort of person that would have gone out of his way to talk and engage in a genuine and meaningful way with people, and just seemed like comes across when you read the stories as just being a genuine, lovely man above all else. And we will remember the footballer as well. I mean, what a gifted midfield player. Very much a modern player in the sense of being an all-round talent, hard as nails, goal scorer, creator. I will chuck in a little stat. He created 7 chances in the European Cup final, the most of any Celtic player. So that was brilliant. He had the highest expected assists in the European Cup final of 67. So there you go. But again,
sorry, you actually did a deep dive on the European thing as well, didn't you?
Yes, I know, and I need to refresh it. I did it before I was really doing any of the sort of packing data, and that'll be quite interesting because football's changed a lot. It might surprise people to know the Celtic dominated the game, obviously, as people know, but only completed 280 passes in the match, which is really low, as you know, by modern standards. That idea of having possession and patience it wasn't really the style of football then, even though Celtic were a footballing team by those days' standards. It was still very direct, sort of vertical football, really. But it was get the ball forward quickly, and that was very much the style, even though Celtic did control the game. But Bertie Auld and Bobby Murdoch were absolutely formidable. Murdoch was my man of the match in that game. What a player. And Bertie Auld not far behind, 3 Scotland caps to scant reward for the talent that he was as a player. But listen, that was a long time ago, and in the years after that, it's the man, it's the presence, the communicator, the motivator, the funny guy, the absolute warmth, humor, and love that he radiated for Celtic at all times, that will be fondly remembered for forever.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of our thoughts in the Huddle Breakdown go to his family and the loved ones he left behind, because he will be forever remembered as a legend of the club, as well as a really good man as well. So that was the passing of Bertie Auld. There is a Celtic game this weekend after a long international fixture. We will get your comments later on. We asked for them on Twitter, but if you are watching on YouTube or anywhere else, leave a comment below. We'll try to get to as many as we can before the end of the show. James, you've been doing some digging into the St. Johnstone side of things for this weekend's game. Obviously, St. Johnstone notably won the double last year, as opposed to Rangers doing anything other than the league. So where are St. Johnstone incomparable to the team that won the double?
Well, I'm going to be a bad show participant and ruin your format again, and I'm just going to say something really quick about Bertie.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay. One of the things that I've one appreciation I've garnered in the last 2 years as I've really dove into initially from Alan's site, and that's how I got to know Alan personally. It was as a reader of his tremendous site and that amazing placard that he has up with the review of that game. Is I think when you look at that team through the lens of analytics, it's even more great than what the legends are. If that and that's almost hard to conceive, meaning that as legendary as all of those players are and have been, I think that some of that's almost been diluted based off of the domestic success that we've had in the last decade. Meaning that what they were able to do not only in the European stage but domestically against a much more league of parity, it's just orders of magnitude different than what the Rangers did in the 90s or what we've done in the last 10 years. And as Alan said, his performance in the Cup final against Catenaccio, I mean, it's just, there's a reason why they call all these people icons and legends. And it's so sad because it really is never probably to be repeated. The global landscape has changed so much. So I just wanted to say that. I mean, it's just orders of magnitude, the disparity in how great they were. And he being, the real word icon, I think, because of that, his three-dimensional aspect of not only a great player but just off the pitch, and his humanity, I think, is what ultimately was the true greatness. So I just wanted to say that quick. Back to something much less interesting. So I think St. Johnstone, when I've reviewed them looking ahead to this game, I think they have some major issues, and I think the issues have to do with talent. A club of their size and resources. I actually wrote this in a piece this past week, and when I took a look at them, they've had almost no transfers in the last decade that they've actually spent money on. I mean, they only have free transfers for the most part. They have less than probably, it's an estimate now. We don't have data for this season, but I'm estimating about 8% of our wage bill. What they were able to accomplish last season was truly excellent, but they had players like Ali McCann and Kerr, and they kind of caught lightning in a bottle. And Davidson did a very good job by all accounts. But when they got about $2 million for those two players when they sold them towards the end of the window, and that likely went to bolster the club for pandemic losses rather than get reinvested in the squad. So I think they've had a material hit to their squad. It's reflected in their performance metrics. They're down about their non-penalty XG difference so far this season through one round is down about 0.6. To put that into perspective, that's more than our non-penalty XG has changed season over season. And we've talked about how much better we've been performing. So that gives you an idea of the scope of, what their performance levels. And they started last season very difficult. They had a rough patch to start the season last year, but their underlying metrics were not in line with that. This season, they're not doing very well, but their metrics are supporting that. So obviously, we're talking about a cup game. Anything can happen, as we all know. Variance is very high in single games. But one of the things they've really struggled with is creating chances from open play. Middleton's not going to be in the game. May's not going to be in the game. So for a team that's already struggling in that capacity, to have two of their players that even theoretically could, hit a shot from 25 yards, which, and to be frank, that's the kind of thing outside of a set piece that's most likely. And in the game that we just recently played against them, now again, it was at home versus Hampton, but the pitch size is comparable and the crowd's likely to be heavily tilted in our favor and energized for obvious reasons. I I think they had like 0.15 xG. I mean, they basically had no chances against us of any consequence. And that game we played with Giacomakis to start. Kyogo's sounds like he's definitely going to start and play the most of the minutes. And when he was on the pitch for a half hour, basically, we blew him away.
Yeah.
So this is a game that we should control and dominate. I mean, I would be shocked if they don't bunker and park the bus and try to just draw this out as long as they can to keep it close. I just have a hard time seeing how they're going to get control of the game and, have a go, as they would say, in this environment with the deficiencies they're going to have in the squad. So I'm, as far as from an analytical perspective, this is about as confident as I've been going into one of these kind of cup games in recent memory, just because of this matchup and what it looks like. And I think the disparity between people saying, oh, well, they're a good cup team, and coming off of that success that they had last season, which was, really amazing for a club of their size. I don't think, I think that's a recency bias thing. And if you look at where they're actually at right now, I think we should be very, very confident.
Okay. Just to give an update on the Celtic squad itself, Ange Postecoglou was speaking today. Giacomakis is not going to be back for this. He thinks it's going to be too soon for him to make a return. Defender Kar Starfelt seems to be a little bit too soon for him to come back, and Tom Rogic in midfield as well as a doubt for this game. Other than that, everybody is available. So you're probably looking at a very similar enough lineup to what Celtic have been putting on the pitch in recent games. Alan, the question always comes up, and it's one of the main questions that's coming into us on social media as well for today, is sort of a question going into this game as well, and that is, if St. Johnstone do put 11 men behind the ball, what will we see from Celtic to break that down? Because in games before the last international break, in the second third, as we described it on last week's show, that is something they really struggled with. So what can we do to break that 11 men behind the ball down?
Yep, I agree with James. It's likely that's the way they'll go. Just before I get into that, then I noticed that their striker Kane was sent off in the last league game. I'm assuming that suspension doesn't carry over into League Cup. I think it's only if it's violent conduct, maybe, that it covers different competitions. But anyway, just want to watch out on. I mean, Middleton and May being absent just further reduces what I've always thought over the last 5-6 years is the team with the least pace in it that we play, and they compensate for it well in other ways by being compact and organised. But this is a team, as James said, that has really struggled to create chances, and the midfield especially, I think, is probably the weakest area of theirs. And you could argue it's the weakest area of Celtic's as well, for all the reasons that we've spoken about. So I think it looks likely, and it makes sense to me, that it being a cup match, they hang in there for as long as they can, and they'll have 3 centre-backs that will play, that won't deviate from the width of 6-yard box, probably. Never mind the 18-yard box. They'll stay narrow, and they'll probably stay quite deep as well. So Celtic will have a forest of, to pardon the pun, a forest of big lads to navigate through, which is a familiar scenario. I think there's as much. How does Celtic get through it? Well, easy answer is patience. Showed that in the game at home against St. Johnstone, where we didn't create a lot, but by the end of the game, we'd especially in the last 15 minutes, we'd really kind of opened them up, many times. And does it matter whether you have all your chances in the first 10 minutes or the last 10 minutes? If you win 2-0, it probably doesn't really matter, actually. Celtic have moved to a model under Postecoglou where they are exerting more control over games. So expect St. Johnstone to be defending that big pitch without the ball for a considerable amount of time. The number of passes that Celtic are, and even the number of possession that Celtic are having in recent times, is, if you can believe it, is even going up. I think possession pre the last international break was 64%. the last game since the last international break, it's actually 70%. I mean, so that's really, and playing St Johnstone, I can imagine it's going to be even higher than that. Because aside from long balls up to Kane, they're not going to have a huge amount to go at. How do you break them down? As I say, patience. And I don't just mean patience from the players, I mean patience from us. The majority of people inside Hampden have got to stay with the team and realise this, for all their frailties in creation this season, this is still a very, very difficult team to break down with a decent goalkeeper and decent defenders. They're not going to throw goals away, right? We've got to stay with them. Got to accept that it may take 70 minutes, 75 minutes when legs and minds start to tire before you start to create those chances. Kyogo playing. Kyogo spent the last 2 weeks sat on a plane. He should be raring to go. He's had a total of about 40 minutes of football in the last 2 weeks, so he should be nice and fresh, hopefully. And the rest of the attack, I think, are in pretty good form. So that speed of movement, obviously, again against a packed defence, you've got to keep moving them. You've got to keep making the defenders make decisions. So that means moving the focus of the attack, moving the angle of the attack. It doesn't, yes, by all means, chuck in the odd long ball, the odd high ball just to mix it up. Keep them thinking. If the worst thing you can do is against a packed defence is fall into a pattern, what I call the sort of horseshoe of futility, where the ball goes round and back and round again. Even if you lose possession, talk about putting risk into it. Just mix it up sometimes. Try a long shot, for heaven's sake. Try it. Try the odd long diagonal. Try the odd cross into the box. Just keep mixing it up, but be allied to being patient, I think, is the way forward. And trust each other. Trust that quality will eventually come through. We've got a reasonably strong bench now compared to where we were at the beginning of the season. So, put it out there, take some risks, run your legs off. Someone else comes on for the last 15 to change the game potentially. It's all those things. There's no magic formula. It's hard work, it's application, it's patience, it's variety.
Yeah, just to confirm that Chris Kane is available for this game. His suspension doesn't come in until next week. Glenn Middleton is a doubt for St Johnstone. He picked up a knock on international duty. And Stevie May is also out for this game. That was confirmed earlier on today. So they're missing a couple of players.
By the way, the last three league games, they've actually only conceded 1 goal, 2 clean sheets in a row. So they're coming into this, decent form. Defensively, they're pretty good. The defense is still one of the strongest in the league. It's just up top, they're really struggling. But yeah, they're actually not in bad form in terms of the last 3 games.
Yeah, they're a defense first side anyway. So if they put more defenders on the pitch and backs to the walls, then they're going to be a pretty tough side to break down. James, Edward Y of Oz is coming in on YouTube here. He's asking about the Beaton revival. Does Beaton's role in this game, is that going to be crucial for Celtic breaking that down? Because he does have a good range of passing that he can hit the first ball through if Kyogo makes that run.
Yeah, assuming he's going to start at the 6, I think he could be vitally important. Meaning, within the context of Alan and my discussion and debate on Jota last week about taking risks, and I think this is the exact kind of game where taking passing risks in the final third should be of paramount priority, and Beaton fits with that hugely. Particularly with Rogic not playing or available. And just another statistic about to support Alan's comment on their likely lack of pace and kind of quality in midfield. They're third to last in the league. Well, they're tied for second to last with Motherwell as far as counter-attacking shots. Right. So if you think about this from a risk-reward perspective, one of the things that you'd be worried about if you're going to be aggressive and try to create chances through risky passes would be exposure and transition and getting counterattacked. And that's just not their strength. They have not been doing a good job at that. They're going to be missing most of their pace that they do have and quality in the attacking third. So for me, from a risk reward, this should be a barrage, an onslaught of attacking their box with risky passes. And depending on selection, I mean, again, this to me, even Abada would be his kind of poacher's strength and ability to create, chances off of deflections and anticipating balls and movements in the air, that kind of thing, could be a good game for him. So, we've talked about in the past some kind of my idea of just when we face these bunkered teams to out physicality, I mean, and that with our better quality and a little bit better athleticism, let's just go ahead and get it in the mixer. Take the chances in the risky passes, not necessarily high balls like Alan says, as far as high crosses. Although I think Kyogo could be really dangerous in that regard against them Saturday, but more so kind of vertical passing, direct balls in the channels, try to hit runners, and if they intercept, then we counter press them and staunch out whatever counterattack they're probably going to try. And what they're probably going to do is kick the ball long, in which case we've seen for the most part our center backs have been handling that reasonably well. And again, they don't really have the speed out wide to, for even with Kane playing and for him to play in someone making a vertical run. Again, it's a risk, but given their profile, I think it's less of a risk than we'd face versus, a guy like Ginelli from Hearts or, some of these other guys that can present a little bit more of a threat in that counterattack.
Yeah. Just a very quick one before we move on to the comments. On the long ball situation with Celtic, Alan, you might have the data on this. What effect does the fact that it's probably going to be Stephen Welsh in the centre-back position now with Cameron Carter-Vickers, does that have on our ability to play long diagonal balls from the centre-back position?
Yeah, I mean, Welsh actually stood up. One of the areas that we commented on in the show last year, the few shining lights of last season, was that Welsh, one of the areas that Welsh improved as the season went on was his passing and his range of passing. I say range of passing. I mean, he wasn't one like Bitton who's going to potentially ping a 50-yarder, but just in terms of not asking for the world, just asking you to break that first line. So even if St Johnstone, they may, if they're being bold, try and put a couple of attacking midfielders like a Wotherspoon perhaps, or I don't know who else they've got that comes to mind.
McPherson they got from St.
McPherson maybe. Yeah, they may elect to go and put those two behind Kane and try and get them to support him where possible. That would kind of make sense. What you won't find, I suspect, with those two players is that they'll try not to be on the wrong side of the ball when the balls move forward. So if you do have a defender like Welsh who's capable of getting through that initial three, then you're down to 7 players between you and the goal. And although 5 of them will be defenders, you'll take those odds. So that ability of the defender to take out that front three. And if you think about other teams that Celtic have played, Motherwell, for example, are very bold and their front three stay high. So you're constantly, pretty much the first pass takes out their front three, and suddenly you're a team of Celtic's quality against their quality of defender, and you'll take that all day long. Whereas when we played against Livingston, they just would not let you get behind them. So even the striker was defending in the middle of his own half. So it was very difficult to even get beyond that front press. To get to anybody. So to me, Welsh, long story short, I think if they do go a little bit bold and do play a couple of players in slightly advanced positions, I think he's got a real strength actually in that ball progression. And then we've seen with Carter-Vickers, he's developing that signature pass from right centre back to what's the old inside right position. So he had a great connection with Rogic, but actually it doesn't seem to matter who's playing there. He's finding Turnbull there with regularity as well. So that pass that is almost his signature move tends to take out at least 2 or 3 opponents every time he does it, and that's a real good base camp to then start building the game. Because then if you can get your creatives on the ball halfway inside their half, you've got a real chance of building from there.
Okay. Anything else you just want to touch on before we move on to the comments?
I was just going to, again, I'm just making the same point again, but their top expected assister in the SPFL is actually May at 0.14 expected assists per 90 minutes, which is pretty average and low. And he's their best, and he's not playing.
He's their best pressing forward. He's been their best pressing forward too, Alan.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I mean, you know, we may well get egg in our face, and if it was last year, then we would be really majoring on all the concerns. But my sense is I'm expecting. I'll be honest, right? I'm expecting Postecoglou another 2 weeks on the training ground with these players. I'm expecting another level of improvement in Celtic's play, another level in terms of cohesion, another level of control, and therefore I'm relaxed as I can be about these things.
Interesting. We will move on to the comments that have come in on the Huddle Breakdown Twitter at Huddle Breakdown. If you want to follow us there, and do leave a few comments on if you're watching on YouTube as well. We'll try to get to them. We'll start with this one coming in from Christopher Smith, and I might take this because it's in relation to Shamrock Rovers. He's asking, are Shamrock Rovers an untapped rich seam of talent? I wouldn't say so. What I would say is that Dermot Desmond owns shares in Shamrock Rovers, hence the added interest in their players. Liam Scales obviously came over to the club, and now Danny Mandrew is being linked with the club. Now, I should say that Stephen Bradley, the Shamrock Rovers manager, was speaking to the media today, and he actually rubbished the claims. He said that Celtic haven't been approached by Celtic about Mandoiu. He was very quick to confirm that Celtic had been in contact about Liam Scales. So you'd imagine that it really wouldn't affect him all that much if he were to say that Celtic had been in contact. Rovers have already won the league. They're not in the cup final. So it wouldn't affect their season at all if he was to confirm that. On Mandoiu himself, I personally would not sign him as a Celtic fan and as somebody who has watched his career develop since he was at Bohemians. He's an excellent player. He's a very good talent, very good on the ball, very nice player to watch, but he's not what Celtic need. Celtic do not need another player like Danny Mandrew. What I would describe him as is very similar to a David Turnbull, very good on the ball, got a good passing range, good at taking shots from long range. There's a good video of him scoring from almost the halfway line for Bohemians a couple of years ago, but he's not quick enough. He doesn't press enough. He doesn't work hard enough. And he is very much what I would describe as a luxury player. He's just, you can't carry a player like that at this level. And that's what I would describe him as. Secondly, his attitude has been brought into question several times throughout his short career so far. He's only in his early 20s. When he was with Bohemians, he fell out with the manager Keith Long over a situation that really didn't deserve for a falling out on a public stage. Then he went to the rivals in Shamrock Rovers. So his attitude has never really been something that people have been all that impressed with. So that would be my thoughts on Danny Mandrew to Celtic. I personally would not sign him for those reasons. James, I'm not sure. Did you look into him in terms of his data or what type of player he is?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, because it was one of those weird links. So who could be agent chatter? Who knows? But just trying to float a story. But he just in the little benchmarking exercise I go through, it did not make any sense from what I could tell. One of the things I try to look at is because, positions are always different, systems are always different. But for a player that age playing at that level to make the jump to Celtic, to me, they need to stand out significantly in at least one area of their performance data. And I didn't see anything in his profile that screamed this guy's dominating his level. So he looked, in the top third consistently of, particularly in attacking, as you said, as far as his peer group in that league. But to me, that did not suggest that it would be, particularly with his age being 23, I think 22 or 23. It looked comparable to Scales to me. Actually, Scales looked a little better from a peer group perspective. So yeah, it didn't jump out to me as a necessarily a good idea.
Yeah, I think he's a good player. I don't want to downgrade him in terms of his talent, but there's a lot going on outside of that would make me question whether or not we should sign him.
I joked when I did a little thread on it on Twitter. The one thing that screams and jumped out is that he scored 15 goals on the season on like 6 XG. So
Oh no.
Yeah, they call that the Schved syndrome. So he's probably had some really great highlight reel type of goals this season, I'm guessing, if that's the case, from distance.
Yeah.
But the likelihood that that's sustainable to that degree is unlikely.
Yeah, the outside of the obvious Dermot Desmond links and why this story has come about, Jack Byrne, who was previously Shamrock Rovers number 10, moved to Apoel in the Cypriot League last year. He's coming back to them now. So there could also be some agent work at play here as well, I would say.
I don't know anything about the lad, but I was just picking up on your comment, Enda, about disciplinary problems and attitude. Just sharing again, these little snippets that you can pick up is, I think Postecoglou not only I think is a fact-based data guy, he's also would have all the kind of old school attributes, and I say old school as if it's an insult, and it isn't. It's not a criticism. But what I'm picking up is that Postecoglou values the man, right? So when he's looking at a player, it's not just about he fits the profile. Can he do the job I want him to do? He wants to know you're a good person within his framework. So for example, I am assured 100% that Joe Hart was his signing, and it's mainly on the back of the strength of the bond they form, the personality he is, what he'll bring to the team over and above the attributes as a goalkeeper. So coming back to this kid, if he's not, and I'm not saying throw in the Lee Griffiths phrase, if it's somebody who doesn't measure up in terms of personality, character, and all those kinds of things, that's gonna be important to the manager, right?
Yeah, for sure. Easily distracted is how I would describe him, as opposed to a bad skin. Let's move on to. There's another question coming in on Twitter from the Resistance Review, and he said, James, I'm sure you've been following the story. I haven't seen it, but Celtic announced that they were looking at for a head of data yesterday at the AGM. What type of candidate should Celtic be looking for on this end? And does this mean that Celtic are moving in a more progressive direction?
Yeah, so that would be helpful. I think I've referenced this in the past, the importance of delineating the different domains. So there's the kind of the data management, data science piece. So you have to think about the kind of the infrastructure where you're having, maybe they're getting data from this system, that system, and they have their own SQL database that they're managing internally, or whatever it is their data infrastructure is. You got to get all these systems to kind of talk to each other and collate data to be able to do the analysis. So there's, IT type stuff. There's then how do you actually go through and deploy data science in order to create the analytics. Then there's the separate domain as far as, okay, once you get all of that stuff prepped up, how do you analyze it? And that's where these worlds have merged to a degree, as data science has kind of gone into machine learning and algorithms. So someone being a data person, it really depends on what that experience and domain means, meaning that what's their experience relative to the analytics piece, relative to the data science piece. I think some experience would be a huge positive. But the other thing is, it's really an issue of culture, meaning that I keep hearing routinely that there's quality people in these kinds of areas at the club that just aren't being listened to. That the top decision makers, and I don't mean this in the sense of Ange, I mean that a lot of what's going on in the last 18 months relative to the transfer market has been driven by other things, not from the recruitment team or the analysts working there. So, I've used the analogy or the example of Barcelona repeatedly, because they've put exorbitant amounts of resources before their financial collapse into one of the world's leading data science arms. They hold their own conference, for God's sakes. the guy who used to run it left to go to one of the biggest up and coming companies called Zulus, and they haven't made hardly any decisions in the recruitment market heading into this year, leveraging any of that. Like if I was working there, I would have been pulling my hair out too, watching some of the ridiculously moronic decisions that they made in the transfer market. So, you know, I always go back to this issue of culture. You can hire the best data scientists and analysts in the world, and if you ignore what they're doing, then what the hell is the point, right? So you can pour all this money and resources into it, but unless you're going to adjust the culture and turn it into, you know, another way to think about this is the data part's kind of on the bottom. That's the infrastructure, and then you need decision science on top of it, right? How are you going through a decision process? And that's a lot of that has to do with humans, more so than data. And I think that's been the part that we're continuously failing on. So good news. Hopefully it's happening, but it's not going to be enough. And some of the talk yesterday at the AGM, you know, continues to make me frustrated and concerned that the high end decision makers, you know, it's going to be tough to get them to shift the culture as far as how they're making their decisions.
You're sitting here trying to tell me that Dermot Desmond and Ian Bankier aren't data driven guys. You're like they
yeah. The comment on bringing Brown back, I don't think he meant that relative to like in a coaching capacity. I wouldn't be shocked if someone like, I mean, that's the level of you know, analytical framework that some of the people at that level are deploying, which, you know, imagine him at this age trying to play in Ange's system.
I mean,
it's patently ridiculous. And again, Brown's actually been pretty good this year at Aberdeen at that level because they're deploying him in a way that's not moronic like Lennon did last season. Like they're letting him sit back, and like a lot of his volume of output's down a lot, but it's because he's not running around like a lunatic like he was last season. Like he's being more focused in how he's deploying his weaponry, so to speak, to break up play and the things that he's always been good at. So, you know, there's just a lot of bad decisions that have been made, and I don't see that shifting until they. And this is a concern with relative to Ange and talk about a director of football, if they're not, or, you know, who's the person that's ultimately going to make these decisions? Is Ange actually going to be empowered to make these decisions, or is Desmond or whoever else is butting in going to screw that up? And they've shown a history of butting in consistently. Never, you know, kind of whether it was, and we don't know from an attribution perspective how much of it was Lawwell, how much of it's been Bankier, how much has been Desmond. All we know is that there's been a lot of it through the years, and you know, if that's going to just all of a sudden stop and they just let Ange do what he wants, I mean, that would be wonderful in my judgment, because to me, Ange is way far ahead of them on an IQ basis relative to what he's actually doing. And I don't even think it's close. So that would be the good outcome. But then again, Ange isn't going to be here forever.
No.
So when he leaves like Rodgers, that intellectual firepower walks right out the door.
You need to be prepared for that as well. And by the signs of the AGM, they're just full on the train that Ange will be here forever and bring us a 10 in a row in 10 years' time. Final thoughts on this song?
Yeah, I mean, I'll call it. I mean, I think the chief meddler has probably left the building, but what we're left with is still an organisation that, because we do have had excellent commercial acumen in our deals in terms of sponsorship, and because we've got an enormous and incredibly loyal and faithful fan base that wants to spend its money on the club, you can easily be fooled into thinking that your performance is fantastic as a commercial director and leader within that organization, when you know there's so many areas that, and when you're comparing yourself against a bankrupt, reckless opponent as well, it's easy to come to the conclusion that you're doing a really great job. So, you know, it's as James has been saying for some time, it's just the wrong benchmark you're using. And if you applied the right benchmark, you'd see that you weren't doing so well. So all I was going to add really is it's a two-way thing in terms of data and getting your ideas across. You know, as a data scientist, a data professional, you've got to be able to visualize and get your ideas over in a compelling way that people who are, for example, come from a football background, may not have come from any sort of academic or research background. You've got to put it in a way that they'll understand and can engage with as well. So it is a two-way thing. But clearly you've got to be hopefully pushing against a bit of an open door in terms of receptiveness to having new information, new styles of information, new types of engagement, new ideas, new ways of thinking about problems and how to solve problems. You've got to be open to all of that kind of thinking, which I certainly get the impression that Postecoglou is. And I'm hopeful, hopefully it isn't a revolution that's needed. Hopefully there are all these talented people sitting in cobweb-infested rooms around the building who've just been ignored all this time and will be revitalized when they'll actually listen to. Hopefully that is the case. But it's very quiet at the moment. Maybe because what the meddlers left behind is a bunch of yes men.
Yeah, I will leave your address and James's address in the description below if Celtic want to get in touch. And
I think we've just talked ourselves out of that one.
We're just about out of time, but I do want to touch on one final comment. It's just coming on YouTube from Matthew Wright. He's asking about Bazunu as a number 2 at Celtic, 19-year-old who's currently playing in League One on loan from Manchester City, I should say. He is a phenomenal player, a phenomenal talent, has been Ireland's number 1 for the second half of the World Cup campaign. Absolutely brilliant talent, good with his feet, 19-year-old who has wisdom way beyond his years, leadership way beyond his years. The issue I see with him coming to Celtic is, number 1, he wouldn't be coming as a number 2. He would have to be the starting goalkeeper. And the second one is that I think he's rated too highly at Manchester City at the minute for them to sell him to Celtic for a price that's within our range of valuation. I think like he's going to be a Premier League goalkeeper in the future. They're not going to sell him to Celtic for a pittance at this point in time, at this point in his career. There's a reason he's out on loan. The reason he's out on loan is that Manchester City feel that he is too good to play underage football for them. He needs senior football at 19 years old. And the second reason is that he's just not, he needs to develop his talent, and he's not going to do that as number 2 to Ederson on the bench because he's not going to get enough game time. So he's a loanee from Man City for a reason. They want to develop him for their team. So on talent wise, I do believe he is absolutely good enough to be Celtic's number 1 goalkeeper. But I think it's just out of our price range. So that would be my thoughts on Gavin Bazunu. But yeah, if anybody wants to take a look at him, just to look at his highlight reel from the World Cup over the last couple of weeks, he's been really, really good. James, Alan, anything else before we finish up?
No, we know you have to go, Enda. You have a life unlike us, so go have your life.
I would just add that goalkeeper, if we've got money to spend, I wouldn't be spending on goalkeeping position at this point in time.
No.
Okay, interesting. That is the Huddle Breakdown for another week. We will be back again next week with a review of the St. Johnstone League Cup final. So hopefully
semi-final. Semi-final. Watch it, Enda.
Yeah, Freudian slip.
Not that confident.
Semi-final. Hopefully we'll be. You
just jinxed us, Enda.
Getting into the final. So that was a good intro. That was a good outro. This is the Huddle Breakdown. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can get us at Huddle Breakdown, or you can get us on Spotify, where you can listen to the podcast. You can also get it on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts as well. And you can subscribe to this YouTube channel as well at Breakdown Inc. And come join us for the weekly show. That is us done for this week. We'll chat to you next week. Good luck.